Hey, I'm Tim, and this is the Love at First Sight podcast, a podcast for SaaS CEOs and developers that truly want to learn more about design and care about it, but they're not designers that find it too complex. In every episode, we discuss how to design products that become sticky and unforgettable. We dive into the topics of taste, UX, growth, and conversions, and we share practical tips and frameworks you can add into your development process. Enough with the intro, so let's dive into today's episode. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining the podcast officially as well, and for making the time today. You've been one of the persons that I really wanted to get on the podcast as well, and I think that if I remember correctly, I discovered you initially through SaaS Talk. I think you gave a presentation there, and I remember talking to you actually. Yeah, I remember like after the presentation that I came and talked to you, and that was my first introduction to your world, and since then I started following you. And so you also engage in microconf, I think, right?
Yeah.
With the community, yeah. And yeah, we started working recently together with some coaching calls where we started helping us with growth on the product design part. And I saw you have a lot of cool things to share once we started working together as well. And I would love to go deeper into everything today. So the first question we always start is an intro about you, who you are, and what is your story, and also who you're focused on helping at this moment, and how as well, since you're into providing services as well around growth.
Yeah, for
So, yeah.
sure. Hi, my name is Asia. I am the CEO and founder of DemandMaven. DemandMaven is a growth consulting firm, and we primarily focus on SaaS companies and PLG companies. And our whole approach to growth is really looking at growth from a holistic and sustainable perspective. A lot of our clients are bootstrapped. Sometimes they have funding, but if they've taken funding, it's usually not like, like big giant VC. It's usually like small amounts of VC or like what we call like indie funding. And we really primarily focus on helping these companies overcome growth plateaus and growth stalls. And I got into this work 8 years ago now. So I've been running DemandMaven for about 8 years. I got into this work because originally, so before I was running DemandMaven, I worked for 2 VC-funded startups in Atlanta, both from like a marketing perspective. So I was a head of marketing and I was also head of demand gen. And when I initially started DemandMaven, I started with a focus of demand generation, hence the name. And I focused on primarily marketing and helping bootstrap founders figure out, what is their early marketing strategy. But what I discovered was it kind of didn't matter if I doubled their leads. I could have tripled their leads. It didn't matter if they couldn't convert them and if they couldn't retain them. And so it was pretty clear very early on that while marketing and customer acquisition is important, it is actually the least efficient growth lever, just like across the board. I actually just did a podcast about this recently, and the person I was talking to is a marketer, and she was kind of like, "Oh," and I'm like, and it's nothing like it's no, I don't think that that's offensive at all. Like it's true, like just from like a mathematical perspective, but also, it's okay, like, to focus on other things, besides marketing, of course. It was kind of funny because she was like, "Oh man, that's kind of hard to hear," and I was like, "Actually, I think it's a blessing. Like from a marketer's perspective, it's very validating." But anyway, yeah. So that's like a quick story, but I mean, other things about me. So since I've been working with DemandMaven and like with other founders, I've helped over 100 SaaS companies overcome slow growth. I have some like incredible stories to tell in terms of like the work that we've done, but also since running DemandMaven, I've sat on the board of Moz, which is the very first SEO platform out there before it was successfully acquired in June 2021. And so through that work, I know Brand Fishkin pretty well and a few others. I've had some pretty fun opportunities, and I think more recently I've been fractional CMO twice. I'm actually in my second fractional CMO position. So I do, in addition to consulting, I also do fractional CMO work and fractional head of growth work as well. And that's like the quick spiel about me.
I love how you describe the service. Actually, you help companies overcome growth stalls and growth plateaus instead of just helping them grow. Like you have a very clear problem you've been solving, and it's a problem that I can really recognize because I've seen it with companies that we've worked with. Pretty much every company hits a plateau. Like I, you have more experience than I do on this since I'm more focused on the product design part. But I feel like when they hit the first million, it's kind of maybe the first plateau. I'm not sure if it's the first, but it's like a common plateau that they hit. And that was the case with ZenMate. But now like the company grew to we're now at 4 or 5 million and growing. So I see like plateaus just happening every few millions now. And it's a very interesting one. And also with other teams that we are working with, we've seen the same, that they grow to the first million, that for some reason it feels like you get stuck, that it's really hard to overcome and go to the next one, and you just have like fluctuation of, I don't know, like 10, 30K MRR, like added MRR in general. It's really hard to go to the second million. So yeah, that's a topic that I would love to dive deeper into, and just keep it open ended and hear more about. Start actually by asking, how do you approach a growth plateau? So it's a problem, but how do you start? We can go deeper into like what are things that you've tried and worked, like what are some real stories where we can get more practical. But the first question is always, that is interesting for me, is how do you approach it at a high level?
Yeah, for sure. Uh, I'll start by validating what you were saying earlier about how it seems like they get to the first million, and then that's kind of like the first opportunity for a growth plateau, and then after that, it's every couple million. From what I've seen, there are three primary, we'll call them like opportunities for a growth plateau, and the first is definitely at the first million. The next is the 3 to 5 million ARR range, and then after that, it's the 10 million ARR range, and each one of those
Mm,
growth plateau, we'll call them like, I guess, like touch points or milestones. If you can overcome them relatively pain-free, great. But if you find you're stuck at any one of those, usually the problems that cause them do look a little bit different. So when I think about how to approach
mm,
a growth plateau, the first thing that I'm asking is, where are we at ARR wise, and like, where are we at? Like, are we at a million? Are we at 4 million and we're stuck? Are we at 10 million and we're stuck? Most of the clients that I work with are like in that 1 to 10 range, and they're trying to figure out how to get to the next milestone. But the way I would approach it, I will, I have the same process that I go through pretty much every single time, but I do look for slightly different things based on where it's at. So if they're stuck at a million, I am pretty much always looking at top of the, just top of the funnel performance, or what I would consider to be like baseline performance. So if you're familiar with pirate metrics, for example, I'm looking at pirate
yeah.
metrics. I'm looking at, acquisition, activation, retention, and then expansion revenue, monetization, and all of those things I'm looking at to get a sense for just baseline performance. And that's true for every company. But the unit economics do look a little bit different for a company at a million versus if they're at 5 versus if they're at 10. And the next thing I'm looking at, of course, is team structure and who's on the team and how are we actually structuring the team. And then the third thing I'm looking at is I'm really looking at processes and how we operate. And the complexity of that looks different at different stages. So at a million,
Mm,
usually you don't have to have like a super robust team. And this is true, I would say, even less than 10. But if it's a solo founder or if it's a founder with like 2 or 3 people, usually one of the first things I say is like, okay, there probably needs to be like 1 or 2 hires like at a million. Like there might be like too many things that we're holding on to that doesn't need to be on the founder's plate and can be on someone else's plate. Um, the same thing is true too for like goal setting. Something as simple as how we set goals and how we think about like reverse engineering into where we want to go and how we prioritize and make decisions. I find at a million, there's a lot of time wasted on stuff that just doesn't move the needle, but it's usually because there might not be enough like internal expertise on like what actually matters. And then the other thing at a million too is like sometimes it is just like an obvious like, oh, activation, like duh, go focus on that. Sometimes it is
yeah.
like, oh, pricing, like that's the thing that needs to get dialed in. But in those scenarios, when it is obvious, usually the team is aware, like usually the founder's aware. but they may not have the right process to actually execute well. So like, yes, we know activation needs help, but like, how do we do that well? Like, how do we do that right? Like we've tried a million things and we haven't been able to figure it out. So usually what I'm coming in and doing is helping them run their very first like activation project or run their very first pricing project. Uh,
Mm,
when they're at 3 to 5 million and they're stuck there, this is where team becomes a lot more important, because usually by that point, like they're actually able to afford a team. The team and the processes and the operations and like how they all work together and how the team is structured, usually that becomes far more important. And what I find is a lot of CEOs and founders don't like hearing this, but what I find is usually what's causing the growth plateau is that it's actually how they're structured and how they're thinking about go to market and also product. And what I find is in order to overcome that, there has to be a fundamental change in what we prioritize and how we prioritize it. The most critical KPI to me, like the most critical metric that I look at with any project, but to me is indicative of their growth, is NRR. So 12-month net revenue retention.
mm,
That's like the most critical KPI. If it's not above 80% at 12 months, on average for your primary customer base, then like growth is going to be slow. And the only way to improve that, there are a couple of things you can do, but you have to look at growth holistically and you have to take into consideration how you're thinking about product management. I think a lot of teams don't like to think about it like that because they're like, oh, we're great at product management. Like, everything we push creates growth. But the reality is like a fraction of what is getting pushed creates growth. And what needs to happen is
mm.
instead, we need to understand which customer segments have better retention over the long term. And also, we have to understand, does our pricing model support growth? And if those things are true, then that means that we now need to refocus go to market on customers that are actually great customers and also make sure that we're pushing features to retain them. Um, if those aren't true, then you're basically looking at only creating growth through pricing or only creating growth through marketing or only creating growth through, one of the levers. And that's limited. If you want to see growth, it has to be holistic. It can't just be one thing. But it's much easier said than done. Much
Yeah,
easier said than done.
yeah, true. But I fully, yeah, I fully hear you on this. It's like, even if you think about a service business, right? Like, we're into the service business. We help SaaS companies. It's the same thing with us. Even if you have an agency, no matter if you close like 10 clients per year, if everybody turns within, I don't know, like 1 month, let's say, or it's like short projects and so on, it's way different if you could retain them for like 12 months and so on. So on this, I fully agree on the holistic approach. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. On, you need to bring more people, but you need to focus on retention, and that's something that we've been experiencing at ZenMate as well. We focused on retention the last quarter. So there are two things there. The one is that there was full focus on retention instead of acquisition, and we saw growth because we saw that within the first 3 months we had like almost 50% of people churning. And the other part was the structure that you mentioned. Suddenly it became a company initiative, and the whole company was focused on that. So we had improvements on the customer success, on the marketing, on the emails, the product experience, where we focused on getting users to the aha moment, on the sales. So there were many improvements across the whole company in order to make it happen. And suddenly we saw, like, we started moving the needle actually. And I can, now that I've experienced it like in more depth, I can really see what you're saying, like with the experience, with the having the whole team to be aligned, or actually the team structure part. Like, my experience in the past was I would try to push for some onboarding improvements, but I can only do a few things inside the product, maybe improve like the first time user experience, have a guest etiquette, like a bunch of different components. But that's what I like to say, is that growth is a collaborative effort. Like, people interact with the support, with the sales, with our marketing, with the product, and we have to align all these teams or people to provide a holistic, great experience for somebody to stay inside the product. Like, the demo calls is another one. So something that I've experienced a lot as a product growth designer myself as well, is that I need the support of the other departments in order to collectively achieve this goal, which is to grow the company. So yeah, really beautiful insights that you've shared so far. And I want to dive into pretty much on everything you mentioned.
Let's do it.
um, so Yeah, let's start with the team structure. I'm curious about some examples and some stories there that you've seen of structures that work well and at some point they don't work well anymore. And what does a team look like? For example, the first million versus a team a team of a SaaS company that is on the like fourth or fifth million plateau.
Great question. Okay, yes. Um, I can tell you the patterns and also some of the pitfalls. So first,
Hmm.
patterns. It's really common at a million for traditionally speaking, and I would say most commonly, the founder tends to be technical, although they don't have to be. I worked with companies where the founder isn't always technical. Sometimes it's there's a co-founder pair and one of the co-founders is technical, or the founder is non-technical, but there is some head of engineering type person like on deck. But all that to say, traditionally speaking, we see the founder is technical, and a lot of the times they might still be committing to their code base and writing code themselves. They might have one or two other engineers with them,
Mm.
but the founder is also usually responsible for product. From there, outside of that, it kind of ranges. Sometimes we see very small marketing teams. Um, but usually the marketing team is not very advanced or like usually it's a more junior marketing team. It's very rare for me to work with a company that has like a very experienced marketing team. But I actually did just recently had that experience, and it's kind of wild actually because I'm like, oh my gosh. But they're much larger. So they're like at that 4 to 5 million range.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes there's a support team or like a success team of some kind. Otherwise, sometimes the founder is doing a lot of that themselves, but usually there's some type of contractor or someone who's doing support of some kind, and that's about it. Sometimes there are like agencies or freelancers executing like really specific marketing tasks. But for the most part, it's a very lean team, is usually what I see. And 9 times out of 10, my number one recommendation is okay, what can we outsource and hire? Because um, usually the founder is doing too much. And part of why
Mm.
growth is slow is because if you think about growth as setting a strategy and then executing it, usually the bottleneck is the founder. And so the number one mission is to figure out, okay, who are we hiring and how are we hiring that person? And if you're at a million, like again, like you can usually afford to hire. You might not be able to, you might not be able to, bring on like a super senior, marketing product growth team, but you should be able to bring on like a few freelancers, contractors, consultants, like where you most need them. And so whenever I work with a company in this kind of phase, um, my mission is to figure out, okay, like with the budget that we have or with our current financial profile right now, here's what it looks like to hire in this scenario, and here's what it looks like to hire in this scenario.
Mm.
Sometimes I work with companies though, like they're at a million, and sometimes they actually have a very like fully stacked team. But usually like there's some funding involved, and again, like 9 times out of 10, like they're not like the super hardcore VC, but just because super hardcore VC funded companies hire a lot very fast. So this is not usually like their issue.
Yeah.
Profitability is their issue, which is a different
Yeah.
problem to solve. But
Yeah.
usually it's, like sometimes I will come across companies that are at a million, but they're stuck, but they have maybe a more robust team. So maybe there's more marketing involved. Like there are like 3 to 4 folks in the marketing team, or maybe like there's like a solid like product team or what have you. And usually looking at growth from here, um, it really becomes a story about how they're all working together. What are they prioritizing and why are they prioritizing it? And also too, are these teams aligned and share a common goal, or is it kind of like marketing's over here doing this and products over here doing this and sales is over here doing this? So that's kind of where team certainly becomes more critical. And when we move up in ARR, so that's at a million, but when you're 3 to 5 million, you could actually have the same story where there tends to be a more robust product and engineering team. Same thing for marketing. It's usually not too crazy. Like I think the largest headcount that I've seen in the 3 to 5 million range was like maybe 20 full-time employees. It could be as large as that, but it could also be smaller. It just, your mileage may vary. Um, but team becomes extremely critical. It's critical no matter what, but it's especially critical at the 3 to 5 million mark, because usually that says, okay, if we're stuck, if these are the people on deck and we're stuck here, then there's something about the work that we're prioritizing that's not registering or translating into growth. And part of my job is to figure out what has broken, because there's almost always something. And it can come down even to like how you're structured. So for example, like just there are two stories that come to mind. There's one company in the like time tracking space. They're stuck at 4 million, and like growth is inching. Like we're talking like a percentage of growth a month over month, which is very, very, very slow. It's still technically positive. Like they're not contracting, which is great, but it's not ideal. It's basically, it's a pair of co-founders, and they have like 20 contractors, 20 to 30 contractors. None of them are direct report, or sorry, they're all direct reports, but none of them are full-time employees. So they basically only have like 3 or 4 full-time employees, I think, in the whole entire company. I could be wrong about this. It might be closer to 10. But the entire org is completely flat. So there's no middle management. There's no, there are no other executives or leaders. It's the 2 co-founders and then like 20 to 40 direct reports. This includes agencies, contractors, like everybody. And so you can imagine, at first glance, you're like, oh man, I bet that's like a really profitable company. And to some degree, yes, like they don't have the overhead, so to speak, of a full-time team. But the trade-off is those founders are so busy. They are the bottleneck for every decision. And also, they don't have the time or the energy to actually make any real investment into any one particular area because they are strapped so thin. And also because there's no internal leadership. They're not just the co-founders. They're also chief product officer, chief marketing officer, chief operational officer, chief financial officer. Like you name it, they're it. It's them. They're the chiefs for everything. So they have to make decisions across every department, despite not everything being their superpower. So this makes it extremely difficult to scale. It's going to be really, really, really hard and difficult for them to overcome their growth plateau until they restructure. But part of the challenge, though, is if you're used to having control over everything for a very long time, even if you don't actually like doing it, it can be hard to figure out how to bring on new leadership. And they've tried many times to hire a head of marketing, and it's fallen apart for various reasons. But for them, like growth is going to be really difficult until they can restructure and kind of rethink about how each department is getting managed. Because right now, there aren't any real full-time employees. It's not really owned by anybody. And also their relationship with their contractors is like they kind of tell everybody else what to do rather than the reverse, which is really, really, really difficult position to be in. So this is an example of a structure that internally is going to make it basically impossible for them to grow and scale. It's literally not scalable because the founders can't infinitely scale because of their time and also their expertise and the way that like they think about each department. On the flip side, so sometimes even the way that a team is structured can impact how growth evolves and how it takes hold. So there's a company that I worked with in the like clinic management space, and this was actually very rare. They have a very experienced marketing team. We're talking like they have like 3 or 4 senior marketing leaders on their marketing team, but the structure is completely flat. So there's no head of marketing. There are 4 incredibly senior, very experienced marketers, and they all report to the CEO, which is great, except the CEO does not have like marketing experience, which if you think about it, if there is no head of marketing, that means that the CEO is the head of marketing. And so the CEO kind of has to make decisions about how to think about structuring marketing, how to run marketing, how to lead marketing. But if that's not the CEO's zone of genius, what ends up happening is the CEO kind of goes to the marketing team and is like, what do you guys think we should do? And they're like, I don't know. What do you think we should do? Like, because no one's really in charge. Despite having 4 senior marketing managers, because no one person really heads up marketing, no one person takes full responsibility for it. It's the CEO's monkey, so to speak. And so I'm really pushing for the team to restructure this out with it. There's a clear head of marketing. And also too the way that they set goals, and again, because marketing is being led by the CEO, where marketing is not that person's zone of genius, the CEO approaches goal setting very differently. So instead of saying, hey, here's the target at the end of the year that we need to hit, let's reverse engineer into trials and reverse engineer into what targets we got to hit across our channels. Instead, it's more like, what do we think we can do this quarter? And all the senior marketing managers are like, I don't know, what do you think we can do this quarter? Here's kind of what we think, but they don't really know where they're headed for the year. And so because of that, um, again, it sounds so small, but just the way that they're structured and just the way that they're picking their goals and the way that they're thinking about hitting their targets has impacted what projects they prioritize. So they're trying to optimize for quick wins within the quarter and not building momentum for the whole year because, again, there's no one singular goal. And also, the CEO is really the CMO. And so now, like, as a CMO, that's how you have to guide your team. So already you can imagine, like, this is kind of where communication breaks down, but also alignment breaks down, and then also like goal setting and process breaks down. But I think the CEO would be much happier if he appointed a head of marketing, and that head of marketing, like the CEO and the head of marketing, works really closely together on figuring out, okay, here's what we're working towards for the whole year. Now let's set quarterly milestones, and now let's track progress towards those milestones, which is a very different way of thinking. But again, like that's really hard to do if you've got a super flat marketing team, especially if they're all senior, and even more so if they're all reporting to you, then you're the CMO now.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are examples of where like team structure can actually completely and totally hold an entire organization back.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It almost reminds me, I mean, it's not the best analogy, but reminds me a bit of the business coaching that I've been going through personally as well when I hired the business coach. When you think that the problem is, let's say, marketing tactic you're using, but there is something deeper, actually. That's why I make the analogy of business coaching where it's what you think that maybe, our LinkedIn strategy, let's say, is not great, and that's why you're not getting clients. No, maybe like your offering is problematic, or maybe you have, I don't know, confidence issues, whatever that would be, or leadership issues. It's yeah, that's where it gets really, really interesting, is to actually go below the surface and look at the core. And I totally hear you on what you're saying, like on the founders becoming the bottleneck, and also like on the lack of clear ownership per area, let's say. Usually these areas are sales, customer success, product. Yeah, product is the topic that I want to go into, and marketing as well. And then within marketing, you can even have like a more sophisticated setup where you have like the performance marketing and the content marketing and all these kind of, depends on the strategy and how many owners you're going to have even there. But yeah, on the ownership and having somebody to really lead a part of the company, I fully hear you. And yeah, if everything gets back to the CEO, it really becomes a bottleneck, because it's not just because they cannot scale, but because they're not great at everything.
Exactly.
And there are people that can come up with better ideas. So you're limited not only by their time, but also by their creativity and expertise. And on the product side, I'm curious, what are some thoughts on these departments? And I'm keeping it super open-ended on purpose, because with product, you have different setups. I've seen like every company is unique. I've worked with traditional tech companies in the past where they do the Scrum and they have like PO, like product managers, and they have the head of product, and they break their team, the company into squads and all this kind of stuff. This has been a thing of the past. Now the teams that I work with are mostly like bootstrap, smaller teams, and more freestyle, I would say, with some that I like more, where you have a bit of the head of the product is usually like the CEO with the CTO deciding what should be the next thing. And then they kind of together decide a bit of the strategy, and this goes down to the product team, um, which is essentially a group of engineers and designers working together and owning different projects. And the teams that I'm working with have no PMs also, which is an
Mhm.
interesting one. So I'm curious about your experience between like the product team setup between different stages, and what are things that you see that work and do not work in terms of also prioritization, not just the team setup.
Yeah. +1 to literally every single thing you said. I see the exact same thing, usually at 1 million. And even at like the 3 to 5 million mark, yeah, there's no product manager. There's also usually no product marketing manager either, which is a key
Mm,
hire that kind of sits between product and marketing. And this is in my opinion, just as crucial of a role once you get into like the 3 to 5 million range. But I digress. What I find is there's usually no product manager. There's no designer, like product designer slash UX designer. And this creates a lot of tension because basically the founder CEO is acting as head of product and also head of design and is
yes.
responsible for translating, product requirements and user stories to all of these folks. And for lack of time, because you're founder CEO, you're doing everything all the time. It's usually not as thorough as it might need to be. And also what ends up happening is you end up shipping a lot of features that customers maybe not complain about, but like they have a lot of feedback about because they're like, oh, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do this. And usually we find there's no user research, there's no product discovery. Usually it's like everything is compiled in like I've seen like markdown files as being the product roadmap. It's just like bullet point lists of like features. I've seen like databases stacked with like Notion ideas. I've seen Jira boards with like tons of cards for, feature requests and ideas, but maybe like nothing moves or nothing really gets validated. It's just kind of like okay, yes, like we're just gonna add this to the list and like, I don't know, use ChatGPT or Claude to like drum up some product requirements and like send that to someone. And don't get me wrong, this is a really fast and scrappy way to operate. But what ends up happening is two things. The first is while you might have the right idea, like it might be the right thing to do from a product and feature perspective, you might end up shipping something that's very underbaked and or doesn't provide the value that the customer is expecting at the end of the day. Uh, I hear a lot of complaints about product adoption being very low and customers not using the thing that they build. Part of that is awareness, but the other part of that is it just isn't like the customers don't find it actually helpful. Like it wasn't what they needed it to be. So that's, I think, the first potential pitfall here. The second is that you prioritize something that is actually not going to create great retention slash adoption in lieu of something else that probably could or would, if and only if we had done better product discovery slash UX research. And what I find is the thing that needs to change at really both of these stages. So if you're stuck at 1 million, we have to understand like why we're stuck at 1 million. Like if NRR is not great, product is the first thing we go to because 12-month NRR has to be above 80% for you to experience growth. If it's less, if it's like 70%, you're going to be flat. And if it's less than that, if it's like 60 or 50%, you might actually be declining in growth. And you're basically putting a ton of pressure on marketing to generate a lot of customers and trialists for you to basically just break even. So all that to say, we have to understand why we're stuck. If it's poor NRR at 12 months, we look at product and we look at how we're executing product. If you are a SaaS PLG company, 90% of your growth is going to come from how you think about product. Everything else is additive. Like it's cherry on top. It's icing on cake. It's not the actual cake. Product is the cake. And if you don't bake it well or put the right ingredients into it, no one's going to eat your cake and no one's going to want it. So all that to say, we have to look at product and how we're structuring product. At 1 million, sometimes it is as simple as just the founder needs to add 1 or 2 steps to their process. And those 1 or 2 steps usually has to do with product discovery and forcing us to prioritize. The second would be really deeply understanding the quantitative side of product, because I find a lot of founders don't spend nearly enough time understanding what was the product adoption of that feature and how did that impact bottom line revenue. And there are ways to understand this, but it requires a bit of elbow grease and some time. And if you're technical, you can probably implement something really quickly, assuming too, like you've got the right code base and all that for, to be able to sustain something like that. But we essentially need to really, really deeply understand what are the features that are money making for us And also, what do customers actually want in order for us to keep them? And it's really hard to do that if you don't understand the behind the scenes of what creates value for customers. And that's where product discovery comes into play. And then UX just prevents you from designing things that people don't want to use. So helping you prevent crappy screens. Like that's really like the biggest thing. And um again, like sometimes it's as simple as just changing like a couple of steps in the process. When you're 3 to 5 mil and you're stuck and NRR is not great, we're looking at product. We're also looking at pricing. Because sometimes it's pricing that really needs like realignment and readjustment. Like your customer base is more evolved now, and they need a different pricing model. But if it is product, and if we're churning customers that we really shouldn't be, especially in that long term, net revenue retention, usually what I find is it's all about team structure and hiring. So ideally, we bring on our first head of product management, so our first PM. Ideally, we have someone on a regular basis doing product design. And also, ideally, we have a process that really supports growth and doesn't kind of have us building random things not well and like incomplete. At the end of the day, like the main value mechanism is going to be product. That's why customers pay. Like they're paying for product. It's literally software as a service. So if we aren't continuously improving product, we are going to see really frustrating long-term churn. It won't show up in the first month or two. It shows up month 8 and month 10 and month 12. That's the churn that should keep you up at night. Your monthly churn number 3%, whatever, great. But to me, the churn that should keep you up at night is the 12-month churn. Like that's what's actually scary to me. And if we don't have that dialed in, it's just gonna be really, really, really hard to grow.
Yeah, I see your point. I see your point on this. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, and the difference between like the first few months versus like the 12 months on these. And I agree. It's like on where it's headed, like it's software as a service. People pay for the product, and this is what you need to pay attention to. And it's about like balancing the distribution, like finding a way to get in front of more people with a message that resonates. But after that, like it's really key to acquisition from what I've seen. But after that, it's really about like make sure you deliver on the promise and on what they need. The other thing that I really like that you mentioned, and I've seen also in your content, is the importance of segmentation. That's something that we went through at ZenMain and the other teams we've been working with on the activation part, where you really need to think about cohorts. Even if the SaaS is very niche, still there are cohorts over there. Like usually they're about the size of the company or other parameters or other variables that every SaaS has. And then you need to look into the retention. What do they need? What are the ones that are more worth investing into, because like the reasons that they churn are very, very different. For example, at ZenMaid, like you see bigger teams churning because we don't support, for example, QuickBooks integration, versus smaller cleaners that may complain about the app, that I cannot do everything through the app. But the bigger teams, they don't care because they're not going to manage a team of 30 cleaners through a mobile app. They need a desktop device. So you can really see the needs, how they can be different. And what I've seen actually as a challenge, I didn't have it in mind to actually ask you this question, but now that I started sharing the story, I feel like I want to ask you, which is how do you decide which segment to focus on? It's very open-ended. I can assume that the answer could be, yeah, Jim, it really depends on every company, the growth strategy they have and so on. But for example, at ZenMaid, we've seen that we want to get people early in their journey into the product and have them to grow with ZenMaid. Like one of our best users and brand ambassadors, at ZenMaid, Stephanie, she started at ZenMaid early on, and she found ZenMaid through a cleaning business, how to build your cleaning business course. And they were saying that you have to use something like ZenMaid. You shouldn't go and use Google Calendar. You need to be a professional from day one. She started with ZenMaid, and she just stayed. And she's been for a bunch of years now, and she's grown a lot all this time. And it's a very interesting one where when it comes to prioritizing your roadmap, you want to focus on the high retention, like bigger customers, but also on acquiring smaller ones. And these two groups, they need different things. So I'm curious about what are some thoughts from your side on what I just shared on this story.
It's definitely it's a very common conundrum, so to speak. But for me, it kind of comes down to like a handful of things, and it's not even it's not a big list. The first is which cohort has incredibly supportive NRR. So that's one. Do we like them? And from a bootstrap founder's perspective, I do think that this is important because technically, like any product can pivot to serve anybody at any moment.
Yeah.
But if the founder and the team doesn't care about that type of user, they're not going to stick with them very long. So I
Yeah,
do
they're
think
not
it's
gonna
important.
commit.
Yeah, like it's important for that team to feel connected to who that buyer is. And then
Mm.
I think the third is, do we have a winning position with that particular segment? So, for example, um, we could go after a particular segment that we're really passionate about. They're profitable. They have great NRR. Um, do we have a compelling enough story to actually attract them? And I think there are scenarios where we have ideas for segments that we can go after, but how like our positioning in the market and our go-to-market strategy might technically be challenging for that because like maybe okay, we could go after that segment, but then we're competing against 10 different tools that, we've never really competed with before. And we can work towards product market fit with that particular audience, but that there's a trade-off to that versus maybe going after a different audience where maybe we have a better like it's still maybe great NRR, maybe we have a better pull for, and also um maybe we also have like better alignment. So if you think about like where your product is and like where it can go, and like do you have a compelling enough story to tell like for that particular audience, I think all those things have to be true. So so again, like I look at, just like the pure financials. I look at the vibes of the team and like, do you like those people? Because it doesn't make sense to attract a whole customer base of people that you're like, oh, I've gotta like, handle the support request for this person. Like you don't ever want to feel that way about your own customer base. And then third, do you have a compelling go-to-market positioning for this? Because if you don't, that's something that you're gonna have to build towards, and you're gonna have to decide if that's worth it or if you should focus on a different audience that maybe is closer to where you're at today. So that's the way that I think about it. It's not usually like a super obvious. I don't want to say it's not super obvious. It actually might be obvious. And sometimes hiring, my company is like helping them kind of validate that assumption. That actually just happened. So for example, I worked with a company again, like this was the clinic management studio, or sorry, the clinic management platform. They it's funny, like 90% of their customers are a particular profile. It's like solo practitioners. And we actually did a qualitative research project where we talked to some solo folks, but we also talked to people who were like multi practitioners, like it wasn't just them and their business, they also had staff. But staff is like a
Mhm.
loose term because in that world it could be like they're just like friends sharing a space, or it could be like no, like they report to
Mm.
you and like they're like your team. And so we evaluated both, and what we found was the people who had staff in a more like committed, like serious capacity, their NRR was literally like 3 times the amount as the solo practitioners. Not only that, but they also were the better customers, even though they didn't have like as strong product market fit, because like there are features that the product would need to build to better keep those folks. But the multi practitioners that the product was able to keep, they're like the LTV is like crazy high, the ARPU is high, like everything about them is like way better. And also the team likes them. They're like, we like these folks, but we've just never really like aligned all the ships to focus on them. And what I mean by that is like, marketing, product, customer success, support, like everyone is focused on the multi practitioner boat. And the roadmap reflects that, and like everything reflects that. So it was funny though, because like after pulling all the data, been kicked too basically. And so I remember I had a call with the CEO before meeting with the rest of the team, and I remember I was like, okay, I'm gonna push you guys to focus on this. Hopefully I don't have to pull your arm too much. And actually the CEO was like, nope, you don't have to pull my arm. I think this is great. We totally should. And I've always wanted to, and I just kind of needed someone maybe to tell me that like we should go after
Mm,
this, because the product market fit gap isn't big. Like it's something that we could close within 6 to 12 months, which if you think about that runway wise, um like that's the amount of time that you would need to do the change management work to kind of pivot the company anyway. Not, I wouldn't say pivot, it's not a big pivot, but just redirect, we'll say realign. So no, it I say that, but like it's absolutely possible within a particular time horizon. I think though sometimes the commitment and the time horizon is what scares people, because like you're not gonna close product market fit gaps overnight. Like it's gonna take time. But usually you're only ever 6 to 12 months away from better product market fit. Usually. Sometimes not, but
mhm.
that's how I think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. That's a very nice one. You actually have to go deep into every segment and do like a proper analysis and take a lot of things into consideration, like the ones that you mentioned, and also like what I've seen from my experience is that segmentation is an art itself. And what I mean by that is you could say, I'm talking about from my side, the examples I made, cleaning business owners between 5 and 8 cleaners, right? Let's say that this is the ICP. But then maybe that's not enough. You need to go deeper and like that they are actually using still Google Calendar and they haven't switched to a competitor because maybe if they're using like one of our competitors, the chance they're going to switch back to us are not high because we're missing a lot of features, for example. But if they're on Google Calendar, we could be a great alternative and we would focus on these people that you shouldn't be using Google Calendar, let's say at this stage. So the segmentation, like one of the things that may be obvious for you, but was like a big learning for us the last few years is that you don't have to use only one variable. It can be many. You have to be
Hmm.
like, and you really need to look at data and really kind of look, not the look at the data and like at the customer base and try to understand where they're coming from. For me, it was really interesting where I started looking at what tool are they using, what is the size of the company, if it's a horizontal SaaS, what is the industry and the use case that they're into, but what happened in their life and where they're coming from has been one of the most important variables that I always look at because many times it tells us what they're going to need. And what they're going to compare us with. And actually, it was the piece of data that I've been using a lot when it comes to designing the onboarding flow, because
Hmm.
how we're gonna sell them really depends on what is the transition they're looking to achieve, what is the before state and the new state they're looking to go into. So yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
It
I
it
fully
reminds me
fully agree.
it reminds me of a story actually. So Ben Chestnut, he was the one of the co-founders and also CEO of Mailchimp, like for forever
Okay.
before it was acquired. And
Yeah.
I think he's still at Mailchimp now. Intuit acquired them. I can't remember how many years ago. But I remember I gave a talk at MicroConf, and I was talking about NRR and how everyone has an NRR report. If you have ProfitWell, you have an NRR chart, and you should pause the podcast and go look at it like right now, because that's how critical this KPI is. And at the after my talk, Ben Chestnut came on stage and was like, "Man, so back in the day, I used to build NRR cohort reports by hand, and he would this was on his way to this was in the early days of Mailchimp, but even after tools eventually got built to do this easier, but he would actually build his NR like cohort retention reports by hand, and he said he would just like flip through different variables and attributes to figure out which segments had the best possible NRR, and calculating it all by hand, in spreadsheets, and like it being super messy and crazy. But he said he never would have figured out where to focus and take the business. Like, should he focus on creators? Should he focus on consultants? Should he focus on designers? Like, who should he focus on? Like, who's the best possible
Hmm.
customer for Mailchimp? And going through that process, it does require a curious mind. And I think it also
Hmm.
requires a mind that can kind of see outside of yourself a little bit. Like, drop every assumption you've ever made about Mailchimp. Who's the actual best possible customer based on the data that we have? He said he built like 20 of those reports and he landed on like 2 to 3, and that basically was what gave him the confidence to move forward with creators, actually. So it ended up being this like creator type. And then also like there was another segment that he ended up focusing on, like marketers to a degree, but like creators ended up being the primary focus. But he had to get really specific on like, well, what type of creator and what type of business owner. And that was how he did it. And he was like, now there's tools like you could use. Profitwell is one, but now like you can export your data and give a file to Claude, and Claude can calculate it for you now. Like it's so easy to do. There's almost no excuse, except for, of course, the time. But that once we produced those cohort reports, for the client, that was kind of what convinced them. They always kind of had the hunch, but I think seeing it on paper and seeing it like, oh shit,
Exactly.
it's literally 110% at 12 months, man. But it's like 10% of our revenue. We should focus on them. It's like, yeah, you totally should. You should like 10x that group, man.
Yeah, you get the data and like a sophisticated analysis that makes you feel safe that, okay, my gut feeling here and the signals that I've been looking at are actually true, and here are the numbers. So yeah, I totally makes sense. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting story. And it's interesting because for our episode, initially I was thinking to dive into like activation and how do you define the aha moment, this specific stuff. But it's really cool how we actually zoomed out and we're looking like at the very high level stuff and how this can have a big impact. Because in the end, every company is unique, and what you need to do for your onboarding flow and so on, you need to figure it out based on like your audience. What do they need to go through? So like stuff like segmentation, team structure, and so on. I also see it as super important there. And it's very interesting when you make it like it. For me, that's the experience that I've seen. You make it a company initiative and not just a product initiative. It can really make a difference when you align everybody, for example, to focus on activation. Um, yeah, I'm curious about, like, I have a topic called vetting systems. And what I mean by that, especially now with AI, I find it really fascinating that we can do so much data analysis and we can actually generate knowledge, right? Like suddenly I can create my own agents and start analyzing all the reviews that people have left online and start doing some segmentation, do all kinds of things. And for me, one thing that is interesting and a topic that I'm always investigating is how can you create rituals and habits around generating knowledge and consuming new knowledge? Because my core principle is that the the better info you feed to your team, the better output your team is going to generate, right? Like it's like a body with food. Like the better food you give to your body, the better energy it's going to have. Like and the happier you're going to be. And I've been thinking about what are some rituals and systems that we could put in place to actually make the team smarter. And it sounds nice and simple in theory, but I've seen it being very challenging to create that recurring aspect uh, of it. And I'm curious, what is your experience with this topic? And if you maybe have any systems that you apply other than the more kind of ad hoc analysis, like you said, where they have a problem with churn, so you go and do a deep dive, you plan the interviews and so on. Are there any rituals you're also creating and you're a big fan of, or not necessarily?
It's interesting. I have an answer, but it's not a sexy one.
Yeah, well,
um,
go for it.
I think that there are, and this is dramatically, aggressively generalizing, but I think
Hmm.
there are two types of people. I think that there are people who are naturally like curious minds and data seekers. And then I think that there are people who are the opposite. Like that's just not how their brain is wired. Like they are very much focused on execution and or whatever implementation, like whatever it is that their job is. Like I think that there are people who are like receptacles, and I think that there are people who are um more like their funnels. Like it like they want to implement. And it's funny because like you said if you give people information, they'll use it. I actually disagree. People don't use information. It's actually kind of like extremely frustrating how little people use insight and information. I think the way that we resolve this and come around it, I think there's two things. You can either build a culture and build a team of insights gathering, insights sharing, and insights actioning, if that's a term. Like you don't just receive information, but you actually figure out how to implement it and action on it. You can build a team of that, and that's something that you can hire for. Like you can identify those traits in your hiring process. I think the second thing is if you know that that's not everybody on your team, but you do have some people on your team who are like really good at, like, they're naturally curious, like they're constantly going through information, trying to figure out how to, use it, implement it. Because like, let's be honest, most people on most teams are extremely busy, and like another piece of information is just not going to enter into their brain. I think it has to be at the leadership level. So to me, like, part of my job is CMO, fractional CMO for my client. Part of my job as fractional CMO is to be the receptacle of information, and then I pick and choose and translate the information that I really want to make sure it gets implemented on my team. I have a senior marketing manager, I have a head of partnerships, and I have a head of community. There are three agencies that we work with in different areas. And part of my job is to be the information distributor. And also, so like, it's kind of cheating because I'm also an insights gatherer as well. Like I do interviews, like there are all kinds of things that I do to collect knowledge and to collect insight. Same is true for like, on the back end, we're using a lot of AI to kind of create like an analytics bot for someone who's not like super charts or reports savvy. So like in natural language, it's called Otis. We can ask Otis, hey, what was like the new user retention rate for users who did this in the last 60 days and like took these actions? And Otis will be like, let me calculate that, and it'll like tell you. Pretty cool. Which is great for my more junior marketing team who doesn't have like super deep SaaS experience, who knows like how to, build like new user retention reports.
Yeah.
So that's literally my job as fractional CMO is to absorb knowledge and then make sure I'm sharing the right pieces, distribute. Yeah. And like, certainly AI can help with a lot of this, but there's a really, really, really good article by oh gosh, I'm gonna totally forget his name. He's like a VP at HubSpot. Ugh, it's not Kyle. It's oh man, I'm gonna totally forget his name. He has a great newsletter and he talks a lot about AI and like how he's using it. Do you?
I don't remember the name, but I've seen the profile.
Yeah. Okay.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's one of my faves to follow when it comes to like leveraging AI like at scale, because he's using it at HubSpot and he talks about like his experiences using AI for like his marketing team and growth team, etc. And one of the things that he says that I completely agree with is like, not everyone is going to be like a data seeker, and that's something that and also therefore not everyone is going to use AI in the way that like we're all using AI. Like the super AI early adopters, your late adopters and like your laggards, like there will always be late adopters and laggards. And so the way that he talks about it is identify your power users, and from there, you can build all kinds of wonderful things from there. But the people who aren't the power users, whose job is it to filter information and give it to the right people, and then not just give it to them, but for the shit that really, really, really matters and is really important, actually oversees implementation, because it's not enough to just give people stuff. I can't tell you how many times my team gets tagged and like, oh, like we just heard this ticket from this person, and like there's always reactions and thumbs ups, and like in Slack, it's like, yep, saw it, thanks. But when it comes to like, okay, but did that person implement anything because of it? 9 times out of 10, not unless I say something about it. I'm like, Katie, let's make sure that we get this in this thing or whatever. Like it could be, there are examples I could come up with if I really thought about it, but like there's just so much happening, especially for a remote team. There's so much happening in Slack. It's impossible for any one person to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
But this is that team and operations layer that not everyone is thinking about. And I think like AI, I think is going to help. If anything, it's going to help, dissect and process information faster. And hopefully it can help us implement that information faster as well. But at the end of the day, like someone kind of has to, not like in a micromanaging way, but like in a more like in a leadership way, like, hey, I really would like to see this implemented in this way. When can that get done? More like that. And not like in the make sure you use this exact thing, this exact insight in this exact way. I don't see the point in that necessarily, but someone still has to like if you really want to see it executed and implemented, I think it has to be either a culture that you build and or at the management level.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's a very good separation on like the different layers within the team and who finds value into the data. Because like, yeah, no matter if you just create, let's say, an AI agent, like sending every Monday the top support issues, I'm just coming up with something, it doesn't mean people are gonna act on it. And the other thing, yeah, like I like how you separate also the different types of people, that you have the people that are love to consume that new stuff and the other ones that are just like focused on execution. You cannot expect everybody to be the same. For me, since like I'm acting as a lead designer, like the head of design essentially in companies, that's why probably it's like so fascinating because for me also I'm looking for a lot of input to influence like the ideas that I'm gonna come up with when I'm working on projects. But if I was an engineer, I'm not sure like if that would be so interesting because I'm just like deep into solving bugs and making sure that the whole thing works. What is getting interesting for me is for the devs now with AI, where like pretty much everybody's using Claude, including us. Now, as a design team, we started shipping code as well. Like now we hand over pull requests on GitHub, and it's not that we're moving away from for Figma, but we're adding coding in the mix to get more practical and closer to the real thing instead of just creating concepts. And what is very interesting is to create a setup on Claude where you can tap on knowledge. So whoever is prototyping, they can easily access existing knowledge. And that could be support issues, reviews, or like any intelligence and insights you have around customers. I feel from everything that I've tried in the past, this feels like the most interesting part where you can use Claude to prototype and brainstorm ideas, and then you can have Claude to actually not be the customer representative, but to bring all these insights to you and challenge some assumptions and so on. Not to really just go and ask Claude, "Hey, what should I build? This doesn't work. Like this is another way to use AI." But yeah, yeah, I love your answer. Like what you said that it's not like a sexy answer. Like these are the kind of answers that we're looking for. It's just kind of the right ones that are running to the reality there. Because with AI and all the possibilities, it's very easy to create a lot of noise. Like, yeah, sure, you can have 10 new reports every week, but who has even the time to read all these and to understand them and really spend the time to think and understand what they're reading? Um, cool. Yeah, I see we have 3 minutes left, and yeah, I'm curious about I have one quick question, and it is,
Please. Yeah.
what is your favorite SaaS at the moment and why?
Ooh, my favorite SaaS at the moment. Um, hmm. I mean, I am there is an AI it's an AI note-taking tool, which like there are a million of them. I am obsessed with Granola right now.
Okay, second person that says granola. Interesting.
Y
And why?
yeah, okay, I really, really, really like the fact that the way that it takes notes is it records device audio rather than being like a bot that has to get invited into like a call or whatever. What I also love is that you can like connect Granola into Claude, and I work from home, and like my team is distributed on both on the DemandMaven side and like in my fractional CMO role, and I am on my computer all the time. I am in a meeting all day, every day, pretty much. And what I love is I use Granola to take all of my notes for the entire day, and like my Spanish, like I take like Spanish classes, and my absolute favorite thing right now is like I can go to Claude and be like, Claude, take all of my calls with Christian and compile all of my notes from the class and compile all of the words that we translated for the day. And then I want you to take that and turn those into like note cards. And it's a personal thing, but for whatever reason, it just gives me so much joy. Like I use it for work all the time. I'm like, Claude, tell me all the things that me and my CEO talked about in my fractional CMO work, and it does it, spits it out like, yep, here's all the things. Granola can do that too, like from its own like application. But just the fact that like it's all in one place, and two, like I can extend the capability by like leveraging Claude. I know it's like one of the simplest of use cases, but it just makes me really happy because like I
Yeah.
I can take that call and turn it into a bajillion other things if I want. I can turn it into social. I can turn it into like there's just so much that I can do. And meetings are, in my opinion, are my most valuable resource from a consultant's perspective. So like the things
Mm,
that we talk about, the things that I educate on, the stuff that I teach, the stuff that I coach, like all of those things are so valuable. And um I don't remember it all, to be honest. And so like knowing that there's a repository there and I can query it at any moment and like it's gonna give me some decent enough answers that I can execute. It makes my brain feel at peace. Obviously, I have to do my
mm,
own thinking for the important stuff, but knowing that it's there and it can be queried, it just gives me like so much peace of mind. Apart from that, though, I am going to give like a more like a non AI answer. There's a platform called Mangomint, and in my fractional CMO work, we are in the process now of redesigning and rethinking our activation experience. Mangomint has the best onboarding and activation experience I've ever seen within the context of their own industry. So if you go to Mangomint and you sign up and like you go through the whole process, um, there are going to be some things that make sense to copy. Most of it, though, is very highly contextualized to the industry. So Mangomint targets like nail salons and like stylists and like hair salons. That industry is traditionally a very low tech industry in that, like, they're non sophisticated buyers. They're usually very, very impatient with like anything too complicated. They are like, there are a million tools that they could use. So they have a lot of choice. They get overwhelmed very easily by how much choice there is. Mangomint recently published, there's a study on them that Kyle Poyar did, I think, on the Growth Unhinged newsletter. And they talked about how Mangomint got to 25 million. And there were a couple of big bets, but one of the biggest bets for them was going all in on PLG. And even more specifically, having probably one of the most sophisticated slash like well thought out activation experiences I've ever seen. So when you sign up, they don't even ask for your info until like I think the fourth screen. It's a very easy sign up flow. It's a validation, like a account validation through text, and then from there they put you into like a playground, basically like a sandbox of the business type that you selected. So if you select that you're a nail salon or if you select that you're a hair salon, they give you a playground of that business type with like real, samples. It's not real, literally real data, but it's like sample data populated. And then they basically are like, you're probably too busy to put in your data to see how this thing works. So let us just give you an example of what it would look like. And when you're ready to exit and like go build your own account for real, you can do that. And the experience is pretty slick. I'm not going to lie. Like, there are some things that I would simplify, but for the most part, I can tell that they know their audience and they have exceptional activation. And also, like, it was one of their big bets to get to 25 mil. And I can see the love and the effort that the design team put into it, that the product team put into it, marketing, like everyone, you can just tell that this wasn't just like a CEO woke up and was like, "Oh, this is the idea." Like this was a full team effort, and you can tell there's a lot of love put into it. It's very sexy. I highly recommend trying it out. It just feels slick, and you're like, "Damn!"
yeah.
And like
I,
this
I've
is like nail
I've actually
salons.
gone. Yeah, I've gone deep into it because it's also like a scheduling software for hair
Hmm.
salons and so on. And it's an interesting one. And they have like the demo environment, UX pattern that I've been curious to test, but the pushback that I get most of the times, yeah, it's too complex where we don't have enough confidence in it. We don't want to try it out. But there's something into it that you can just have a demo. You don't need to do any data entry and then you can test everything in there.
100%.
Uh, and with no risk of, I don't know, like notifying your customers by accident and so on. So yeah, I should take another look this month
Hmm.
probably to get some inspiration. But yeah, I've tried it in the last 6 months and I totally agree with you on everything that you said. Yeah.
Owner.com is similar. They're like a management platform for restaurants, but they also have a really nice sign up experience. It's like, it's slick. You're like, damn, this is really cool.
Mm,
But yeah, anyway. So I'm really a fan of like super slick activation experiences right now. So anytime I
yeah,
find
makes
one, I'm
sense.
like, ooh. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally hear you. I totally hear you. Cool. Thanks a lot for the answer. I think that that's all from me for this episode. Maybe we could do like it would be lovely to do even like another one in a few months to go into more like now we're more like on strategic advice. Like we'd go into more tactical like activation patterns. We could look into onboarding flows that you love and why you love them and so on. I feel it would be really fun to actually start getting more specific about like the product experience and so on. But yeah, for today, I love that we test all the high level stuff and the very strategic part. So thanks a lot for your time.
Of course.